Hey guys, it's Sasha. I am seeing an increasing number of people say that the US economy is doing great. There seems to be this perception that if the overall numbers look good, that must mean that on average, people are doing better financially right across the board. Because, the US unemployment rate is relatively low at 4.1%. Real wages keep on growing. So according to the data, people have more money to spend. GDP per capita is absolutely exploding in the US, while economies in other countries around the world are stagnating. But the problem with all of this analysis is that it lacks nuance, because average numbers have two big issues. First, they can be massively distorted by already rich people doing well, while the lower paid people are getting shafted. And I am going to show you the data, a lot of data that absolutely shows this very problem. I have all the receipts. But the second issue is that the average numbers sometimes suffer from what's known as the Simpson's paradox. I apologize for this one because it is a bit nerdy, but I am a mathematician. The Simpson's paradox is a phenomenon where the average number can be improving, going up, while at the same exact time, that same number for most of the individual segments that make up the average are actually doing the reverse, the exact opposite. So while average wages look like they are going up quite fast, things are great, it can also be true at the same time that the wages of many of the segments, if you split people up however you like by their income, etc., are actually going down. Because if the distribution of people between those segments changes, that can skew the average. The truth is, after the recent inflation spike, life has become incredibly difficult for many Americans and small and medium-sized companies. But nobody is talking about this. It is an unpopular thing to say because the average numbers look good. And it is also perfectly possible for the stock market to be booming, for all of that stuff doing really great, while at the same time, the economy cannot be doing great, especially as far as the average lower paid worker is concerned. So let's start with incomes. In a recent update by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median weekly earnings of full-time employees have increased to $1,165. 5 years ago, before the pandemic and the inflation spiral, the median wage was $921. So wages have gone up 26.5% in the last 5 years. And the people who say that everything is great will go and show you the inflation data, because in the last 5 years, inflation has gone up just 22.7% cumulatively on average. So if you look at just this data, well, it sounds like average wages have been going up faster than inflation. So the average person apparently is doing just fine, or according to some people, most people, because, if the average is doing fine, then apparently most people are doing just fine. So why is it that in the last 5 years, a lot of people are feeling like they are completely fucked financially? Is it because people are delusional? Is it because they don't understand? Is it because those people are influenced by misinformation or disinformation or social media? Or is it because they are actually experiencing financial hardship because they are finding that times are really hard and harder than they were before? Well, here is a recent dataset published by the US Census Bureau called Income in the United States 2023. According to this data, the median household income has fallen in the last 5 years when you take into account inflation. The median household income was $81,210 when adjusted for inflation in 2019, and it was $80,610 in 2023. And even worse, if I put this data in a chart, you can see that the number of people earning less than $35,000 was higher in 2023 than it was in 2019. And here is a different chart from the Atlanta Federal Reserve. It shows the distribution of individual wage growth in the last 5 years. And you can see the median line, the orange line, well, that line is doing just fine. Median wages are currently growing at 4.6%, which is above inflation. And median wage growth has generally sat in the same rough area of between 3 and 7% through this period. The purple line is the mean. It's higher than the median because some of the extremely wealthy people have seen their wages increase a lot more than average. And then look at the blue line at the bottom. This is the bottom 25% of earners. So this is a quarter of the people that go to work in the United States. the quarter of the lowest paid people in the United States have seen their wages go down continuously over the last 5 years. And it's really important to read this paragraph above the chart. The wage growth tracker is the time series of the median wage growth of matched individuals. This is not the same thing as growth in the median wage. Growth in the median wage represents the experience of a worker whose wage is in the middle of the wage distribution in the current month, relative to a worker in the middle of the wage distribution 12 months earlier. These would almost certainly include different workers in each period. So this chart is literally showing you the Simpsons paradox in action. If you are, for example, a young worker and you were earning a starting graduate salary somewhere in 2019, then perhaps 5 years later, you are now some sort of a senior associate, maybe even a manager, whatever. So you're probably earning more money. And the disparity in pay between the lower paid and the higher paid people has been going up. That's why the average is going up. So if you are earning a lot more money because you've progressed up the career ladder, well, good for you. But the average worker, the same worker who sits in the same sort of role, the same company or the same industry, continues having the same low pay, and their pay is not increasing. That average worker is not seeing any improvement in their financial situation. In fact, those low-paid workers are actually seeing a big deterioration. It's right there in the data. And then remember that whenever you see data about inflation-adjusted wages, remember that wages are always adjusted by the average consumer price index number. The lowest paid people are adjusted by the same average inflation, and the highest paid people, their wage growth is also adjusted by the same exact inflation data. You know, the index that includes buying new cars, buying new watches, buying new jewelry, buying new TVs, and so on. People who are struggling to get by are probably not buying new cars and jewelry. So average inflation has gone up by 22.7% according to the US data in the last 5 years. But what do lower paid people spend most of their money on? Well, inflation for food at home is up 27.3% in the last 5 years. And if you look at the most basic components, the cheaper end of the spectrum within food, things like eggs have gone up 79% in the last 5 years, meat and fish are up 33%, the list goes on and on and on. So food, especially the basics, has gone up much, much more than average inflation. Energy has also gone up much more than average inflation. Energy is up 27.5% in the last 5 years. And within energy, the electricity bill is up over 30%. An electricity bill started skyrocketing in 2021, well before Russia invaded Ukraine. Rent, for example, is up 27% in the last 5 years, also much above inflation on average. Car insurance is up over 50%. The point is, those on lower wages are not spending their lower wages on new cars and on caviar. And everywhere that they are spending their money, those things have gone up way more than average inflation. So when people talk about adjusting wages for inflation, it does not tell you what people on lower wages are actually experiencing. Because if the majority of your monthly expenditure is to pay rent, food, electricity, car insurance, the very basic things, then your average inflation is way higher than the official average inflation. Because all of those things, as I've just shown you, have gone up a lot more than average. And it also means that your real wages have actually gone down in the last 5 years instead of going up. It means it is harder to pay your bills because your money does not go as far. And the Fed is now reducing rates extremely slowly. Just like they were way too slow and way too late on increasing the rates when inflation started going up, they are now doing the same mistake in reverse. Last week, they reduced the interest rate by 25 basis points. So now the interest rate is sitting at 4.75%, while inflation has fallen to 2.4%. And this is because the Fed is continuing to look at the average numbers, just like all these other economists, without understanding what is actually happening to working people, to the people whose jobs underpin the entire economy. High interest rates mean that interest on debt is costing people a lot more. And you know who has a boatload of credit card debt? lower paid people, because they are finding it hard and have to borrow money to make ends meet. High interest rates also mean that companies that do not have bags of money, companies that are not Google and Apple and Nvidia, regular everyday companies that employ the majority of people, they are struggling too. So those companies hire less people, they have to let go of people, they don't extend people. I shared data last week on how US job openings are collapsing and unemployment is creeping up. And yes, unemployment is at a historically relatively low level at 4.1%. But the problem is that historically, unemployment has never once started creeping up and then just stopped. Just stopped and decided, I'm not going to keep going up. Every single time previously that unemployment started increasing, it resulted in a much bigger increase followed by a crash. Now, that crash could happen next year, could happen in 5 years' time. Maybe this time will be different. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is that unemployment is going up, and that hurts one group disproportionately, lower paid people. And here is the paradox for you. Imagine you have 100 people and you arrange them in order from the one earning the smallest amount to the one earning the highest. Then let's just assume that their median wage is $1,165 as it is right now. Then imagine that the 3 people who earn the least lose their job. They get fired. They're no longer a full-time employee. So those people are fucked, right? They can't feed their family. They can't pay rent. They can't pay to heat their home. They can't pay for gas to take their kids to school. They are in a bad place. But you know what happens to the median income? Well, it goes up because those lowest wages that were part of the equation have exited, right? Amazing. Great for the economy. Clap, clap, clap. There is no better way to lie about reality than using statistics. In 2 months' time, the United States is going to have a new president, and we already know that part of the economic plan is to end taxes on tips and overtime pay. Now, this is definitely going to help some people who earn tips and can get overtime, but that's only a small part of the issue. And the bigger picture really is whether the new economic policies can reverse the direction in which lower paid people have been going for several years now. And those people may start suddenly feeling better about their finances. Now, I am not sure how they would do it, but if interest on credit cards is indeed capped at 10%, as has been said, that would be a very welcome boost for many of the lowest paid Americans who also pay the highest levels of interest on borrowing because, well, they don't earn a lot of money and they're higher risk. Their interest rates are higher. Now, I am genuinely not sure how that could possibly be implemented without the government picking up a huge bill for the difference. But Trump also promised to loosen regulation on drilling and to introduce import tariffs. Now, those may bring big positive impacts to the US economy in time, but the impact of these policies is likely to take years to see any meaningful effect. If importing goods from China becomes more expensive, now it will take time to set up production in the United States, to build the factories, to set up the supply chains, to set up the tooling, then go hire the workers. And as the Fed is busy fucking around and saying that they are not accountable to anybody and can do whatever they want at their press conference, it's unclear if any policies coming from the government in January can significantly improve the situation for lower paid Americans in the short term. The problem with economists and rich people lecturing on the economy is that they don't know what it's like to feed your kids but then not have enough money to buy food for yourself, and so you go and eat a bit of toast before heading to sleep. It's easy when you have investments and assets and property and lots of money and 10 different income streams to not understand that someone slaving away 12 hours a day at a mind-numbing minimum wage job does not have the time or the headspace to even begin thinking about how they might be able to earn more money. It's easy to go look at the data and say, look, the average number is going up. Therefore, everything is fine. The majority of people must be doing fine without even trying to understand what the reality is for large numbers of people. It's easy to dismiss people's concerns. There are families in the United States today where the dad doesn't know how he will be able to put gas in the car next week because the bank account is already empty and his credit card is maxed out. And the number of people in bad financial situations is increasing. We can see it in the data. And dismissing those people and saying that their feelings are irrelevant because of some dumbass chart is naive. I can tell you that poor people, people on lower incomes, do not get a kick out of feeling financially stressed. They don't particularly enjoy it. They don't enjoy feeling fucked and hopeless because the system is set up against them. Those people are not panicking about how they will get to the next paycheck without defaulting on some bills because they read some misinformation or disinformation on Twitter. Their bank account is not empty 10 days before payday because they misunderstand what the actual economic situation is and don't realize how lucky they really are. I see a lot of people on Reddit or on Twitter talk about articles like this one from the New York Times called "Wages Have Outpaced Inflation, but Not for Everyone." And this article makes the claim inflation adjusted weekly earnings for the bottom 10% of workers in the third quarter this year were up 7.3% from the same point in 2019, compared with 3.6% for workers at the top. And below you have a table showing you that people on the lowest wages are apparently seeing the biggest increase in real wages. So, it's the rich people that are getting shafted here. The poor people are doing great. The problem is, I just showed you that the basket of goods and services that these lowest paid people spend almost all of their money on has gone up at least 5 to 10% more than average inflation in the last 5 years. And the reverse is true for higher earners. They spend less of their total income on the basics like food, energy, and housing. So if you did the same calculation using the relative inflation, the inflation that applies to the things that those particular people and those incomes spend their money on, well, you would get the exact opposite result. It would show you that the bottom 10% have not seen any real wage growth, or maybe actually saw their real wages go down a little. I guess if you're wealthy, if you have bags of money, you maybe have never thought about this sort of thing because you have never walked in the shoes of a person who doesn't know how they will pay their bills next week. And then remember that total household income is not the same thing as average individual income. An average individual income is not the same thing as the trend of income for the same consistent person over time. If a family is struggling and their real earnings are going down, maybe eventually push comes to shove and the wife that was full-time looking after all of the kids goes and gets a part-time job in the evening stacking shelves at the local supermarket, while the dad, who already spent 12 hours at work and is now exhausted, covers the kids' bedtime. The average income of the wife increases in this example, and average wage data goes up. So the economists and all the commentators and the guys at the Bureau of Labor Statistics are happy. Number go up, great, chart go up. But the truth is, that family is not better off. Let's hope that things change, because celebrating big wins, massive wins in the stock market in the last couple of weeks does come with a massively bad taste at the back of your mouth when you can see data saying that tens of millions of people are really struggling financially, and that struggle is still getting worse, and there's a whole load of people gaslighting and saying that those people don't know how good things are.